So to dive into the work, my style has evolved a lot from here, but I wanted to show you guys my starting point from when I first started sharing my illustration work. So the one on the right is actually my first ever post on Instagram. And it's literally a black and white like ink drawing that I scanned in and posted. I guess I thought it was pretty cool. The black and white look lasted for a little while, but I knew eventually I wanted to incorporate more color and give myself a little bit more creative freedom. My work from there got a lot more playful, and I didn't really have any like particular style goals or boundaries at this time. I just sort of did a little bit of whatever I felt like. I also got an iPad around this time, which I'll speak about a little bit more later about how that sort of shifted my my trajectory, if you will. But initially, the apps that I was using with the iPad was the Adobe drawing apps, which are good apps, but they're definitely not quite as like in depth, or at least they weren't at the time, as Procreate, which I'd heard about. And then I eventually got, I don't know why I was like resisted it for so long, but I did. But you can see in this piece that I definitely started building on certain details that would later define my style. For example, the nose and like the circular cheeks. From there, I got the Procreate app finally, and this shifted everything pretty quickly. So the color palette feature on Procreate allowed me to start putting together colors that I could always go back and refer to in the like color palette builder. And also this phase was definitely a period of play and getting used to the brushes that are offered through Procreate. This is even more recent work. I was still loosely playing with my palette and adding and taking away colors, ultimately for a slightly more mature vibe than the original palette that I was using. And you can see on the left that basically like I started playing with scale, or sorry, I guess both of them, but playing with scale. So a little bit more of a petite head with like a more caricature, like exaggerated body. Yeah, and then same with this one, it just is another example where I'm playing with those same sort of style characteristics. So the sort of like petite little head with the larger body. And then subject matter throughout all of this time, and even like pre-Instagram times, I've always loved drawing people, women, especially fruits, plants, sometimes animals, sometimes just like silly little cartoons like the one on the left. And probably up until like a year ago, a lot of my work was a little bit more like commentary on like current world events and that sort of thing. Yeah, and then same sort of idea here, like I'm playing with scale, playing with different colors, but there's something that's a uniting feel between them that I've been working to develop as of late. And then recently I've been playing a lot with typography as well, and just bringing that into what I'm actually sharing online. I've always been big into type, but I haven't really done that much of it like up until this like most very recent times. So that's been a fun sort of transition into doing more of that. Oh yeah, and then who doesn't love coffee? But again, it's a scale and particular figure styling that sort of unites this one with the last few that you've just seen. Yeah, and then the last note that I had was, while I do share my design work occasionally on the gram, so graphic design work specifically, I have noticed that a lot of people follow sort of my feed for the illustration and lettering style in particular. So you can definitely, you know, go to my website and see my design portfolio. But as far as the conversation today on style, I'll be talking a lot more specifically how with my illustration style. So yeah, that's that.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Now on to Stephanie.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me here. I'm Steph Boutari. I'm an artist and a muralist based in Waterloo region. I've been doing this full time now for about 4 years. Before that, I was an architect. Well, not licensed, but basically that was my field. So most of the work I do as an artist are murals. They vary in scale. A lot of them are for commercial clients, but also in public spaces, inside or outside. My style has definitely been evolving and continues to evolve over the last few years. This was my first mural, actually. And I began painting murals while I was actually an architecture student. So you could see that initial influence of architecture and geometry and structure in my work, and it continues to be present in my work, I'd say. One thing that I would say stylistically that has been consistent over the years is that my work is typically quite colorful, incorporates, abstract shapes or geometric shapes, sometimes gradients, and a sort of three-dimensionality or visual depth is something I'm always striving to accomplish. And then I think that has been driving my style, but then I'm curious about all these other things, and then I'd get these different projects, like a different design brief according to the context or the client. And through that, I've explored different things such as sort of more figurative work, but there's always that present style or sort of my DNA of that geometric, colorful shapes that I still bring. Sometimes it's sort of like they're conflicting with each other, like the sort of soft shapes, organic shapes and gradients, and then that hard edge geometry, and then some flat color. So I think over the years, though, that tension between the two starts to become more obvious in more recent work. And at this point in time, I'd say this was like couple years ago. I was at that point where it was very much a hybrid of that initial pure geometry. But I mean, even in that first mural, there was some kind of curves. So there was always that kind of interest in that too. But generally, I started doing murals because I was interested in art and painting, but on an architectural scale. I was still very much interested in architecture, but I wanted to find a way to bridge my two interests. And I was always interested in how art can create sort of spatial or 3D effects, and how it can transform how a space is experienced, or how you perceive the surface, even though paint is, just it's on a flat surface, but then it creates a three-dimensional effect, and affects your mood and everything. So all those are kind of architectural effects that I strove to and continue to create through my artwork. And I think that is something that I guess is still driving my visual style to this day, but then it continues to, I bring in new things depending on where, the context or who I'm creating it for, and also based on new interests. I think more recently, nature has definitely become more consistently visible in my work. And this is one of my more recent murals, and it's very different from the first one, which was pure geometry, for example. But I'd say there's still some elements of my personal style that can be seen here, despite there not being the hard edges.
That's great. Thank you so much for walking us through your journey. And Ayla.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Ayla. I'm a graphic designer and a motion designer based in Ottawa here. I just recently graduated from the graphic design program at Algonquin just in April, actually. And I'm now working as a junior motion designer at Banfield here in Ottawa as well. So my background lies in fine arts. So that's where my journey began, actually. So I studied the Bachelor of Fine Arts at Ottawa U in my first year of university. That's when I discovered media arts. And I learned that there's such thing as the world of video and post-production, which I fell in love with. So this is one of my first pieces with post-production. The assignment was to demonstrate time passing through a particular perspective. So I decided to demonstrate that through my mom's visual impairment, taking her sight throughout my childhood using my childhood videos. So after a year at Ottawa U, I decided to switch gears to graphic design at Algonquin. And in my second year, I discovered motion design. And of course, I fell in love with this too. So this is my first motion piece working with kinetic. Oh, sorry. The one before, yes. So that's my first motion piece working with kinetic type. So still pretty new. And then the next one. So this is a couple motion classes deep. We started tackling a little more dynamic motion pieces. So this is a broadcast package. So I've evolved my skills a little more and kind of getting more comfortable with motion design. And then after that, I decided to try out some 3D animations in Cinema 4D. And I fell in love with this too. So this is when I really found my niche, which is just 3D animations. So for this one, I just followed a course in Skillshare and I had so much fun with it. So then from here, I just kept playing around with 3D and started incorporating them with my knowledge of 2D animation. So these two are actually both collaborations with my partner, Andy. He's an album cover artist here in Ottawa. And the one on the right was actually featured in the latest zine from the Ottawa Design Club. Yeah, so then after here, so these are a few pieces from this year. This is when I really started to get comfortable with motion in both 2D and 3D and cultivating my style. A very pivotal moment for me this year was doing the 36 Days of Type Challenge, which I'll be speaking on a bit more later. And yeah, that kind of brings us to current day. So to sum all this up, here's my motion reel.
Oh my, I don't know for you in the audience, but it's hot and talent in here. Like we're in for a treat tonight. So thank you so much for your introductions. I am eager to just dive into the questions right away. So kind of as an icebreaker, like we just saw a quick overview of your creative career, but how would you define your style in one word and why? And I'll start with Chelsea.
Yeah, so it was really hard to pick one word, but the one that I felt encompassed my body of work as a whole was cheerful. So I chose this because my work is bright and silly and sometimes a bit tongue-in-cheek, but usually ends up exuding sort of a positive and playful vibe. And I don't necessarily do it intentionally, but I will say that I'm never happier than when I'm like creating, especially just free drawing. So I think my work sort of takes on that cheerful spirit.
I think this is like a perfect definition for it. What about you, Stephanie?
I found it hard to decide on a word, but I decided on vibrant because despite the different subject matters, sometimes abstract, sometimes not, that's the sort of a feeling that my pieces tend to consistently evoke. And I'm always trying to create sort of energy or like visual movement with my murals, especially. So that's how I think vibrant. Also with the bright colors and the color combinations.
Mm-hmm. I would say like subject matter, the colors and everything's like, yep, that's how I would define it as well. And what about you, Ayla?
I guess I would use alternative to describe my style. I like to explore with sometimes unconventional or different methods or techniques just to see what comes out of it, such as combining the 2D and 3D animations. You don't really see that too often, I think. And I guess like the color palette too can kind of be tied with like the alternative style, like kind of dark and then some pops of bright color. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just add that Ayla is the one that did our visual and our whole motion graphic for the advertising of this event. So yes, I think we should all have like virtual hands for Ayla. Because it is great. It's like sets the tone perfectly. And like we barely gave anything. Like we was like, have fun with it. And she came back with something super great. So yes. So clearly you didn't always have that style from what we saw for all of you, really. Do you remember the moment that led you in a specific direction? Chelsea, I'd like to start with you because you have shifted a lot from what we saw, like a lot, to say the least.
For sure. So I touched on this a bit in my intro, but as lame as it is to say, it did have a lot to do with the equipment. So getting the iPad, getting the software like Procreate, just being able to create at such a large volume has been so helpful in just like developing over time. And then just to be specific about when I landed on my character style, basically I had a freelance illustration client back when I was still working full time, and they basically wanted like an editorial piece made about food. So I was looking at references and I kind of did this like small head, bigger body situation, which you see some of that around these days, but it kind of just really worked in the piece that I did. I was like happy with it. And I was like, oh, like maybe I'll just stick with that. So yeah, I just went with that from there.
Interesting. And for you, Stephanie, like you always had kind of a similar style, and like we can see you like kind of like going around like
yeah, I mean, I kind of deviate from the style. Well, I wouldn't even say that, but I explore different things, but I'm still within the style. But I'd say I guess my moment where I felt like I was onto something would be while I was an architecture student and when I discovered murals, because I was very much interested in color and art on an architectural scale, and the impact that art can have architecturally. And so when I didn't really know anything about murals, but I sort of did some research and became really inspired, and had all these drawings and then small paintings that I later translated into murals. And I looked at different case studies and stuff like that. And so that was when I got very excited by this idea that I felt had so many possibilities to explore. And so it was more about the idea and the kind of visual effects that drove me in the beginning to really delve into that style.
That's really interesting because specifically with your background, I mean, I don't know plants that much, but like it's not using color. So for you, it was kind of like let's just do something different and let's see.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was the color thing was also definitely like a reaction or rebellion to all these white models we had to do in architecture school. And we weren't really talking about color at all. It was always about the form and the space and the function. So that was just something, working on the surface alone and working with color was very much like in conflict with everything I was learning in school. But I think with time, that my color palette just evolved based on certain effects that would happen and certain color combinations that I liked the way they look together. I like to contrast a lot of really warm, hot colors like pink and orange with blue and green. Just that, I think everyone has a different color palette, depends on what the effect they want to achieve. Like that's a very different energy than a monochromatic piece or, muted pastels, for example.
Absolutely. And you, Ayla, in your introduction, you kind of touched on your aha moment.
Yes. So I actually had two aha moments that kind of led me into the direction I'm at now. So the first one was when I actually first discovered motion design, because it perfectly married my passion for graphic design and then my previously discovered passion for video and post-production. So it was really awesome. And it felt like I really found my niche at that moment. So it was very exciting. And then my second aha moment was, like I mentioned earlier, when I did the 36 days of type challenge this year. So I went into that looking to discover my style actually, and luckily that's what happened. The specific moment that it clicked for me was when I got into a really deep flow state on one of the letters. And I was playing with a new style. It was the letter F, if you're wondering. And I kind of realized that not only did I love the style of what I was doing, but I also enjoyed the process of making it. So
It's funny that you use the word flow, and then it's the letter F that
oh,
was
yeah.
kind of like the pivotal moment.
Oh, that's great.
So you all spoke about the aha moment, so when it clicked, but how did you go about refining that idea and style after that kind of initial click? Stephanie?
I would say, I don't know, I have too many thoughts in my head right now. Ask someone else first. Let me just
Sounds good. Chelsea, I'll let you go first then.
Sure. So it's definitely still like evolving, and I think it'll like my style will always sort of feel like a bit of a work in progress. But I got there by looking at like loads of references, making mental notes of work that I admired, and deciding what I specifically liked about the pieces. And then just sort of intentionally like widening and shortening my net to incorporate different stylizations, so that what I was making started to take on a cohesive feel. And kind of like Ayla said, like I enjoyed sort of a certain thing that I was doing, so I just kept doing that, and then it sort of just led me down its way, you know?
Yeah, totally. Ayla, after that F and that flow, you know, what did you do after that? Did you just keep going in that same direction?
Yeah, so I continued through the rest of the challenge, kind of exploring that similar style. But similar to what Chelsea said, like it's still being refined. And honestly, I'm kind of in a transition moment right now where I'm discovering a new style I might want to take on. But I think the consistent thing for me is combining the 2D and 3D animation. So I think that'll stay relatively consistent, but the look and feel might change. So still a work in progress.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, I think my style, so I mean, like I said before, it was that interest in creating visual depth and kind of 3D illusion, but not like trompe l'oeil, like realism, but just through geometric shapes and, you know, like almost like op art, but not cheesy. So I was experimenting with those concepts, but then also I think spray paint as a new medium that I had never used before, that also drove a lot of my style. And because whatever medium you're using, you know, influences your technique and then the aesthetic style as well. You know, I don't really have visible brush strokes, for example, or it's not as very kind of spontaneous looking. Like my work tends to be very kind of crisp and precise, and that's to do with some of the techniques I do with taping, for example. And then the gradients of color was something that opened itself up to me naturally through using spray paint, because that was a practical choice for, you know, doing exterior walls. And then that ended up becoming part of my signature style through that initial desire to do like the sort of 3D effect.
Yeah, it's crazy to think how much the actual materials and technique will influence your style greatly, especially in your case when you're limited to a specific medium. So you spoke a lot about color earlier, Stephanie, but all of you have a pretty distinct color palette that you seem to work within. Is that something that came, well, I guess Chelsea, you also spoke about the black and white, switching over to color, but basically, how did you pick that color palette, or how did that happen for you? And we'll start with Chelsea.
Yeah, so it's definitely been like a conscious choice to sort of like keep things a consistent palette, but it's like a mashup of colors that I found myself going back to and enjoying working with. And I tried to notice patterns in what I was like gravitating towards in terms of inspiration, and then sort of just like combining all of those together. And then, yeah, and then I ended up with a palette that's unique to my work now after this time. And I feel like I give myself the space to just like pick like colors from here and there and like decide if I want to sort of bring that into like my house, if you will. But yeah, so I think another thing is that like with my palette that I'm using now, I haven't yet gotten bored of it, which I think is important, because if you're getting bored of your colors, you'll feel like you maybe want to stray from them. And then you'll naturally sway to like whatever colors in the rainbow are in front of you, or like catch your eye that day type thing. And then it's hard for your work to take on like a cohesive feel. So yeah, I would just recommend like experimenting until you find one that works for you. Not that that was the question, but hot tip.
We love tips.
Yeah.
So Ayla, you spoke about like the alternative color, the dark with the colorful pops. Is that something you're still kind of working within at the moment?
Kind of. I think, well, I first started incorporating color because I realized I was really comfortable using dark colors and tones. So I wanted to kind of push myself out of my comfort zone and spice things up a little bit with color. So it's kind of an experiment thing, and I really liked it. So I think I'm more comfortable working in color now. So I'm leaning more towards a colorful palette and less of like the darker tones now, but still in a similar area.
Awesome. And Stephanie, I know you spoke a lot about color earlier, but did you have anything to add on like how you figured your color palette?
I think I was just really interested in what Chelsea was saying about getting bored of colors, and that, yeah, I could see that totally happening. I mean, I use a lot of bright colors, but I've never felt at that point bored. And I think it's because rather than, and I think it probably applies to you both, picking colors because like, oh, I have to pick these colors. It's more like there's another reason that you're picking those colors. Like there's another goal, like whether it's the feeling or the theme or whatever it is. And I think that inner voice is what's driving your style, and that drives the colors. And so those colors might shift slightly, but it might still feel like your style. I don't know, that's just my take on it, but yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. Okay, so switching things a little bit, I personally believe there is something to be said about finding inspiration in work that resonates with you, especially when you're first trying to find your voice or your style. Who are some of your early influences, and do you still reference them today? And we'll start with Ayla.
Sure. One of my biggest inspirations is a motion designer from Montreal named Melina Poirier. She works at one of my favorite motion studios called Gimmick, and I just really love her style, like everything about it. But in particular, I really liked how consistent she was with each of her pieces and her palette. But that being said, each piece still had its own tone and its own like style within the consistency, which I really liked. And she was actually the one who inspired me to pursue the 36 Days of Tight Challenge. She's done it a couple years in a row, and I thought it would help me to establish my style, and it did. And I still reference her for timing and easing of pieces, but since I've found my own style now, I feel pretty comfortable in that. But yeah.
And how about you, Chelsea? Do you have any early influences?
Yeah, like going way back, I've always loved cartoons, especially like silly ones, like SpongeBob SquarePants, and like the Nickelodeon style of animation in general comes to mind. I think we can all agree that SpongeBob is like chef's kiss art. But I've also always loved looking at more classic art as well that you find in like art galleries. I'm especially a fan of like post-impressionism, like Van Gogh, also like Picasso, that kind of stuff. Like just the greats, you can't go wrong by cruising through a gallery. But I also love looking around like vintage and antique stores, looking at old typography in books and like old packaging, that kind of thing. I think that can be like, you can find some good kernels of inspiration going through old stuff a lot of the time. And then I'll just rapid fire a few more like contemporary names, probably ones that a lot of you guys are familiar with that are always good to look at. So like Paula Scher, Lauren Hom, Lisa Cogden, Erin Droplin, Tad and Jessica Carpenter, and Conrad Gartner. And then I also follow like tons of different independent artists who do really different work than what I do, like tattoo artistry, interior design, mural art, like I love it all. So it's a total mixed bag for me. And I never know what's gonna like inspire a little creative something. So yeah.
I love that. We'll be adding the references in the chat, so you guys can all go check all of these out. And Stephanie, do you have any? Oh, there we go.
Yeah. My influences are quite varied. Like if I'm going back in time, in high school, art was my favorite subject, and I did A-level art. So I studied a lot of different artists, and one of my favorites was Bridget Riley. She, did a lot of these amazing kind of op art type paintings in the 60s. And later, a lot of them were black and white. And later she introduced color. And there's a lot of, it's amazing how the visual effects of when you look at, it's just flat colors, but beside each other, they change and it almost seems like the canvas is moving. And I remember being obsessed with that as an art student, and also even just pointillism and the whole idea of optical fusion. Your eyes just blend the colors together. And even I used to create these paintings that you would have to wear those glasses, the red and blue glasses, to look at it. So I think that's funny because I wasn't planning on doing that kind of thing later, but and then I ended up studying architecture because I was too scared to study art. And then later on in architecture school, I became really inspired by artists that were almost like architectural artists, such as Daniel Buren. And he works with a lot of colored, like vinyl or film or whatever. So it creates this colored light and crazy installations. And Saul LeWitt, which is more, he does these wall drawings that are very abstract, but very architectural in a way. You just have to see them I can't describe it. And Yayoi Kusama, which is less, it's not really about the geometry, but it's more about the immersive quality of her artwork, filling a whole room, you're surrounded by color. And then when I sort of branched away from architecture and I started doing murals, one of my first influences was Mad C. She's a street artist from Germany. She's incredible. I was inspired by her, partially, because she's this female graffiti artist, which wasn't common when, as it is now, before. And also she kind of does really huge, colorful, abstract, spray painted artwork, which also I thought was unusual, for a graffiti artist, that she initially started doing lettering. And then I actually started using the same spray paint that she does. But I mean, now I don't really reference these artists and influences as much, but they definitely kind of helped shape my interest in the beginning.
Yeah, tip.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I was just gonna say, one tip I did here is to, find that work that really sparks something within you, and kind of inspire yourself from those people at first, and through that you'll find your own kind of creative voice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Over to you, Izzy. Sorry.
No, it's all good. We were both like excited about what everybody was saying. So that's it. Like whenever you see other influences, I mean, I'm guilty for that. Like I start to compare myself, and sometimes that makes me not want to share my work with the rest of the world. Like, when were you ready to share your work with the world? And I want to start with you, Stephanie, because whenever you do work, it's already in the world. So you have no choice to share it with the world.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I definitely wasn't ready. I just started. So my first mural, like I had no experience. I literally just found out who owned that building, asked him if I could paint his wall, and I had never done that. So I didn't even have, like, I had some small canvas paintings that I did for my portfolio, but anyways. So yeah, I wasn't ready. I just started, but I guess I felt more kind of officially ready or ready to be taken seriously when I took the leap to quit my architecture job and do it full time. Because then I'm like, you know what, this is like, I just, you know, I'm gonna do this full time now. And then I still didn't feel like my style was fully developed. I still don't think it is. I mean, it never really is. I don't know. But I mean, I knew that I still had a lot of developing to do. And when I did start out, I did a lot of very different pieces. You know, some like very doodle style, you know, like line work, and, you know, because I was curious, like I wanted to try these things. And then I found myself gravitating back towards what excited me most in the beginning anyway. But I felt like I needed to try these different things out for my own curiosity, at least in the early stages.
That's great. It must have been, like, for you, Ayla, a bit more, you must have been a bit hesitant. I'm assuming, being a student, everything seems scary when you graduate. How do you feel about sharing your work into the big, wild world?
It really is intimidating, especially as a student. Similar to Stephanie, I was never ready to share. So when the 36 Days of Type Challenge came around this year, I decided to force myself to do it, to just put my work out there, in kind of like a no strings attached way. So it was kind of less pressure, because I knew it would be kind of an experiment. It's just for fun. Like there's no, like no strings attached. And it was so rewarding. I received a lot of great feedback, and it really helped me to grow as a designer and gain a lot of confidence in what I do. And yeah, it's really easy to internalize your work. So having a platform to share it with people, it really gets you out of your comfort zone. And I think that's really when the magic of finding your style happens.
And if I'm not mistaken, putting your work out there did land you a job in a great agency in Ottawa, right? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was the work in my reel in combination with the work on my Instagram. I think that helped me land that job, and also networking. Sharing your work helps build connections with other artists who enjoy your work, or and yeah, that can help a lot with finding jobs or just getting to know people who are in your field as well.
See, like, just do it, right? You just have to take the plunge and hope for the best. Don't refresh too much. Is that how you? Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna pipe in and say, like, you have nothing to lose. Well, that's how I felt. Like I felt like I had nothing to lose.
That's it. And I think you feel the same, Chelsea, right? Like,
yeah, I was gonna like echo a lot of the same stuff as the other two ladies. Like, I still feel hesitant from time to time, or even a bit anxious from time to time, because, you know, your work is by nature so personal, right? So it feels a bit scary sometimes, but you never know what's going to resonate with people. And sometimes it really surprises me. Like the pieces that I like, you know, I'm most hesitant to share will often be the ones that seem to resonate with people the most. Like not always, but sometimes. So even though like I, you know, don't always feel like sharing, it's definitely a good learning experience either way. And yeah, super positive, same as what Ayla was saying. So yeah.
and if you do ever have like a negative comment, I like, sometimes if it happens to me personally, I'm just like chiming in here. There is that awesome quote from Jessica Walsh that says, if nobody hates it, then nobody really likes it. So if ever like you do come across like some, like, you know, a bad comment, just remind yourself of that quote. And I'm saying that for everybody in the audience. Like, don't quit on somebody hiding behind a screen. It's not worth it. So Oh, please continue.
Oh, I was just gonna add, like, sharing even when you're not comfortable with it can like help keep you accountable, and like, yeah, just getting that feedback is always a good thing, whether it's positive or otherwise. Like, and yeah, like you'll never have a style if you don't have a body of work to represent your style. So just,
Exactly.
yeah, just Nike, just do it. Yeah.
The beauty of Instagram, worst case, you can delete your account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have to be pretty bad. Like,
I love the archive tools. Like sometimes I'll go back into like my portfolio and I'm like, archive. And then I'll go back and like, oh, this is actually not bad, unarchived. Like I go back and forth all the time. So we kind of like are starting to touch on this, but why is having your own voice, like in what you hope to communicate, is important for your work? And I'd like to start with you, Chelsea, because I feel like the message, even like through like a quick look, is very, very prominent in in the content that you're sharing.
yeah. Well, why is having your own voice important? Like, this is a big question.
It is.
And I saw a quote recently that I thought spoke really well to this, which is, you can do anything, but not everything. And I think in a world where like artists and visual designers, anyone in the creative field really is made to be like a content creator and constantly kind of being like a machine, and like, yeah, the self-comparison and all of that, it can feel really overwhelming looking at other people who seem to do it all, and trying to keep up with that. So having a voice that is truly your own authentic voice can keep you like focused and like on your track. And I'm personally kind of intentional with that, in terms of what I choose to post, like with my illustration account, just to like keep everything, yeah, like sort of cohesive. And yeah, some folks might have the opposite approach, and for them that works. But I think just having everything have like meaning to you and have like an authentic relationship with the artist's work, and yeah, that will come through. Yeah, just be yourself, be authentic. You'll find your tribe. That's what I have to say about that.
I love that you said that, because I know that you do branding identity like during like your freelance work, and that was being like spoken by like the words that you used was like all branding terms.
Yeah.
so like, great. And you, Ayla, from our previous conversations, like you mentioned that having your own voice like sets you apart.
Exactly. So having your own voice really makes you stand out from the crowd, especially when the like art side of social media is so saturated nowadays. The way you see the world is unique, obviously, and I think that strongly reflects through your work. In terms of what I try to communicate, I think at this point I just want to share my evolution as a designer, just by sharing my work and like sharing my journey through my styles and like my new techniques that I've learned and whatnot, and hoping that I could maybe encourage others to do the same. It's fun to watch people grow through social media.
Absolutely. And once you hit a certain stage too, it's nice that whenever people reach out to you and they say, I was inspired by this, it's like really, like sometimes like you will put something into the world and you don't know that it has like a ripple effect. So like exactly. When that comes back to you, it's the best feeling. You, Stephanie, you had kind of an other answer. Like you were kind of like not on the opposite, but on the flip side, I should say. Like from our rehearsal, you said that it's not necessarily for everyone to have a voice.
Well, I mean, I guess like it also depends on how you interpret the question, but like because for me personally, like with my work, it is very important for me to have my own voice, because I feel like it's my work. I want it to feel authentic, and you know, it's important to me, like the quality of what I produce, and that I, you know, stand behind and I'm happy with it. But I mean, the whole voice thing, if you interpret it as like the work you're producing being visually recognized by everyone, or having your DNA in it, or I don't know how else to describe that. That isn't necessarily, I think, important to everyone. Sometimes it's just about, or to every project you do. Like sometimes, I just do experimental stuff where it's not necessarily about my voice, and it's just more about technique and about producing quality work or refining a skill. I think that's also important too, to your development. And then some people are more happy actually being more technical and not necessarily it being their own, style or whatever. But I mean, it's still, they have to feel happy in what they're doing at the end of the day.
That's very true. Sometimes we can put too much pressure and like if you try to force a meaning into your work, it's not as strong most of the time. So that kind of needs to happen organically. Yeah. You're absolutely right about that. But once you do know what you want to communicate, then, it's like, again, depending on like what you're trying to achieve I think that's like almost like personal to your practice and like the goals that you're trying to reach. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Over to you, Ariane. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just like thinking, well.
No, please, like this is a panel, like we can talk over each other.
Well, like for me, one of the goals that like I try to achieve with my murals that I think drives part of my style is, I wanted to create like a kind of positive energy. I wanted to inspire people. I want them to stop, and look at it, or like feel like that they appreciate where they are if this is in a public space, or, make them think of something, so those are some of the goals I have. Everyone will have different goals for, depending on your project and who it's for, if it's for anyone. Yeah, I feel like I lost my train of thought there, but oh yeah, well that's part of my voice, I'd say, versus like in some cases, say, if I'm approached to do a mural and they're being overly specific about what they want, and I feel like there's no room for my voice, then I feel like it's not even about the style I bring anymore. There's no room for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's like important also to have kind of a backbone to stand up to that and know like where's the boundary, specifically when it comes to client work, which we will touch on a little later. Over to you, Ariane.
Feels so official.
Yeah.
Kind of on the flip side of that, we're talking about being consistent and keeping with a certain style, but do you sometimes feel stuck with the style that you not necessarily picked for yourself, but that the work that you're doing now, it's all in a specific style? Do you sometimes feel tempted to try something else, but then think, well, that's not my style, I can't really go there, I have to stay consistent? Is that something that you've struggled with? I'll start with Ayla.
This is actually kind of a funny question. I used to have a crippling fear of getting stuck with one style when I was first diving into motion, and it kept me from exploring different techniques and finding my style. But now that I've sort of cultivated a style, I don't really feel stuck with it, ironically enough. I like to look at my style as a work in progress, because I know my skills are just going to keep evolving from here, and I think my work will look a lot different down the line. So if anything, I find it very exciting.
I think that's a great way to look at it, like not feel stuck with it, but excited what's to come. Chelsea, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely used to feel confined by, like, for example, you guys saw some of my black and white pieces that I was doing, and I did that for some time when I started, which I think just made me realize that like I wanted to do other things as well. So then I had a phase of like experimentation and creating what I wanted. So the other extreme, so like no like style to speak of really. And now having done both, and yeah, similar to Ayla, like cultivating the style that I work in now, I do feel like pretty at peace with working within that. If anything, it kind of just helps like give me a few less decisions to have to make when I just want to make something or, produce something. But I can definitely still relate in the sense of like sharing, when it comes to sharing, because I do some analog work, for example, like paintings and photography, and like those literally don't see the light of day, but I try not to limit myself in terms of like what I'm doing, to like continue learning and bettering my skill set and whatnot.
Yeah, not everything needs to be shared with the world. You can,
exactly.
Stephanie, you had mentioned sometimes feeling pressure about the Instagram feed when we spoke last time.
Well, I feel like earlier on, I had the opposite problem. I wanted to try all these things, so I wasn't feeling held back. And I felt actually that I should have a more consistent style. But then, like, as time passed and more recently, I feel that pressure, like I do feel like my style has it's becoming more apparent. And with that, I'm finding there's more pressure to be consistent. But at the same time, I don't feel like it's holding me back from trying new things. It's just making me more selective about what I want to do, because that early phase of like trying things out has helped me learn about what I'm more interested in doing and not doing. So I don't feel like it's holding me back, but I do feel like sometimes a bit of that pressure to at least like on the outward impression, be consistent, to the point where like, I used to have on my website all my work, and then I filtered it down because some of my older pieces, people would ask, oh, if I could do something in that style, and I don't really do that anymore. So I just removed those projects from a portfolio, for example. That's just more being selective than feeling constrained.
That makes sense, for sure. Over to you, Isabelle.
We're being so polite today. So how do you personally continue to develop your style? Ayla, from what you mentioned with the 36 days of type, that you like to push boundaries, and right?
Yes. So I'm always trying to push boundaries and learn techniques to continue developing my style. I really like taking online courses or following tutorials on YouTube to learn techniques, and then trying to find new ways to implement them into my work to, like I said, further develop my style. Some of my go-tos would be School of Motion, Domestika have some really good courses, CG Shortcuts on YouTube for 3D stuff specifically. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, Skillshare is a great one. I also try to put myself out there and do a lot of volunteer work in the design world. It's helped me to keep building on my style and just gain as much experience working in the field as I can.
If I can do a shameless plug for online tutorials, Adobe Live is also a great one. But yes, absolutely. Like this, I think it's always a good idea to refine your craft, and that's how you grow within your own craft. Because like you can never hit the ceiling while learning, and there's always a new technique or maybe like a new cool effect that you can find when you're just playing around. So I think you're absolutely right on that. Chelsea, you like to get out of your comfort zone.
I do. Yeah. A lot of my answer is somewhat similar. I definitely like to, push boundaries as well, get out of my comfort zone, look at a lot of different references. Like there's literally an endless sea of inspiration out there. Like the internet is your friend, but it can also be, a little overwhelming when you're trying to define a style, for sure. And I'll sometimes create things that don't really naturally fit into my style, which, like you have to give yourself sort of the freedom to do that, to, explore creatively. It usually allows me to come back to what I have been doing and prove to me that the style I'm working in is sort of the right track. And if not, I'll incorporate the new idea. And I think it's important to think of like a style as a framework, not a boundary. So like something to be inspired by, not limited by.
And for you, Steph, like from our previous conversation, you said that stepping away from the client work helps you to dive more deeper into like defining your personal style. I guess it's kind of the same with you, Chelsea, but like passing it on to Steph.
Well, yeah, like sometimes when I get really busy doing client work, when I get a break from that, I like to step back and reassess and think, okay, what is really driving me to do this? If I wasn't, if money was no object, what would I be painting right now? Like, why? And I also like to look back at previous work sometimes and analyze and look at it and notice trends, or try to think like, what are the constraints, or not the constraints, but like what are the rules that I've applied to myself, and why, or like what has changed and why. And those kind of questions help me kind of self-evaluate and develop when I do it more often.
So there was a really great piece of advice here. I hope everybody wrote that down. Go back, look at your work, and try to define the rules that you were applying while doing that work, and then try to go above that. That's golden.
Thanks.
Thank you. It is so great. This is actually also like the perfect segue to our next question. Have you found that creating something in your style without any client modification can makes you feel the happiest? We highly touched on that already. But Chelsea, you mentioned that you love to create for yourself, but you also really enjoy like creating for the client. You kind of have that happy middle, which is, I think it's the perfect balance. Personally, that does not mean that it's applicable for everyone.
Definitely. I think both can be fulfilling in different ways. So like I previously mentioned, but illustration, just like drawing, is like truly like a flow state, a hobby for me. So where my brain just sort of does its thing, and it's self-expression. So of course there's like so much joy in that process. But that being said, like the other side of the coin, when you're working with a client, it's a creative challenge. So it can be very rewarding when you feel like you sort of ticked their boxes and created a solution to their problem. And like, since going full-time into like working as an independent, my like best days are when I get an email where a client is like happy with something I've done for them, or something's being well received. So it's like, one is like super chill, super happy, but the other is like very rewarding, and like both are can be good, I will say. Because sometimes like too much constraint or whatnot, like you run into that issue where you're like, maybe you're working on something that you don't really feel like your heart is as in it as, say, like a drawing where you get to just do whatever you want. But you can definitely find goodness in either one, I think.
And I think it could even be applicable to find like that fulfilling like feeling is whenever you submit something to a client and then there's no revision. That's like right? But it also happens when there is a lot of revisions, and then you finally hit that I love it, right? And then it's like also
or sometimes the client makes the work better too, just to be fair to the clients of the world, because truly sometimes like that input, like they could be the expert, and putting that into practice can be really good too. So
I agree. I think that sometimes it like the revision part of it, and I don't want to digress the conversation, but comes from maybe miscommunicating the idea or what they're trying to achieve. So there needs to be revisions in place, but a good communicator, that's probably when you hit that no revision part, which
a good design brief is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So since you're talking, Steph, like please answer. No. But I was going to segue over to you, because you've mentioned that you're at your happiest when you're kind of doing it for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with Chelsea too. There is a satisfaction when you feel like you've satisfied your client and like you have these sort of limitations or, you know, a brand or something you're trying to work with, but that you feel like it's still you, you know, and that you found that happy balance. But I mean, it's different doing artwork versus design work. So I feel probably more of the tendency to, oh, my screen just disappeared.
Oh, no.
See me and hear me?
Yes.
I don't know what happened. Where are all of you?
Oh, no. Okay, well,
you can still hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just continue. Sorry. What was I going to say now? Oh, yeah.
You can have a minute if you want. Like I can go to Ayla and you can try to, if you want. It's good.
I remember
okay.
what I was going to say. I think that when they don't know, when the client doesn't exactly know what they want, or they're kind of trying to have too much control over it, then it dilutes the design or the original idea driving it. And then I'm personally the most happiest and feel my work is most successful when I have creative freedom. But that's usually in the projects where it's like a public space and it's more about artistic expression. And then it gives me a chance to just explore what I'm excited about. And I'm not limited to a specific color palette or subject matter. But it's different probably for graphic design.
But that's what makes it so interesting. It's the fact that we all have different like line of work in this panel, and like, you know, sometimes it's like it aligns with like defining your style, and other times it doesn't, like for this question. So and that's what, like, that's the beauty about creativity overall. It can go in like multiple directions. I'll stop because I'll probably make myself cry. So
I'm back, by the way. The screen came back.
Oh, good. You, Ayla, you must be like, you know, going through the train because you're working in an agency. So you're working on their brands that are already created, and, you know, you can't necessarily apply your own style all the time. So how do you feel about your happiness and your style in the everyday work that you do?
Well, just speaking on having complete creative freedom with a project, I absolutely love it. And it's such a great feeling when the client also loves it. A good example of that would be the animated piece I made for this panel. It just gives, yeah, it's a lot of fun to just like kind of put yourself into a piece with no restraints and it being well received. It gives me confidence that I'm actually good at what I do. It helps me learn that I can actually solve specific creative problems completely on my own. But I'm finding even doing agency work that isn't necessarily in my style, when it gets received well, I still get a similar feeling personally. Like, yeah, it still gives me the confidence that I'm good at what I'm doing, like whether it's fully in my own creative freedom or within the confines of a specific project.
I guess that when it comes down to, even if you get like a positive feedback, whether it's something that you kind of like to something that you really like, I mean, you'll take the compliment, right?
Exactly.
So that, I mean, who are we kidding, right? We like to. Over to you, Ariane.
Well, for sure, like, we're in creative work, we put a lot of ourselves in our work. So getting that, I love it, or that positive feedback, I don't know, it's like a little extra important maybe for us.
Yeah, we take it personally.
Yeah. we have to not, but we tend to anyway.
It's hard not to, sorry, like
for sure.
It's so hard not to, because I feel like it's the way that we think that we're putting into the work, and that's what's being critiqued.
Yeah.
Maybe I should change how I see it, so then I would feel better about it. But you know, still it's a learning curve, I guess. And I'm sorry I took over.
No, it's all good. It's kind of in the same vein in the next question. have you found that clients reach out to you for your style, or do you often venture outside of your expertise for client work? So Chelsea, for example, you'll have, when we go through your Instagram feed or your website, we do see that cohesive style. When clients reach out to you, even if it's for graphic design work, do they tend to request that specific style, or it doesn't matter? They just,
yeah. Well, you mentioned like it's an interesting one because I do like a fair bit of illustration and a fair bit of graphic design. And when it comes to illustration, definitely people are, maybe attracted to my style and looking for that. Whereas with design, like I haven't necessarily tried to go for any cohesion between projects. I think it's just like emerged naturally over time because that's my taste, that's my like approach to the problem. So yeah, it's like they're both their own beasts, and yeah, I have a bit of both. And in terms of the work day to day, sometimes that's actually a bit of a challenge for me because I go from like the super like creative brain of like, well, not that design isn't creative and illustration. Well, you guys know what I'm saying, but like illustration is one cap and then design is another. And then flipping between the two, it can be just a bit of like a switch over because your mindset's a little different between the two. But yeah, I get a range of people coming and they want a certain look, and then some people just need design. So both.
there you go. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And the thing about graphic design too, and that we had that conversation last time, is that we don't necessarily, like, it's not art, it's something different, but we do still tend to have a style kind of happen on its own without us even noticing that it's happening.
For sure.
And I sometimes think too, as sometimes we look at freelance designers, I'm thinking of Meg Lewis that has a super distinct style, and that's everything that she shares, even if it's graphic design work, it's all that kind of clown circus style. But sometimes I wonder if she has a lot of other work that we just don't see. We'd have to ask her, I guess. Ayla, within the agency that you work at, do you tend that you have the opportunity to work within your style, or is it really not quite happened yet?
I do get some opportunities where I get to do things that are a bit closer to my style, but more often than not, most of the day-to-day, the style is already established either by the client or the design team or both. So we get handed the assets from them and then we animate them. But we do have a say. It's a very like open thing. But more often than not, it's not quite my style. But that being said, I'm learning so much in my time working at an agency, and having things predetermined and like having to achieve a certain thing teaches me a new technique. So those things I incorporate into my own style. So I guess indirectly, I get to work on my style a little bit. But yeah, mostly it's predetermined, which is still fun. But
yeah, I personally enjoy some sort of box that I have to work inside of creatively. Yes, think outside the box, but I don't know, getting those guidelines that you have to work within is like an extra challenge that I tend to enjoy personally. Stephanie, in your case, I assume 100% of your clients go to you for your style since it's murals.
Most of the time, yeah. Although I do think that, if I was painting canvases, for example, and like I was an artist and I didn't do murals, I would get more so, like people, it's just more expected of artists to like do their own style. Whereas I find that, doing murals, I do get occasional, wanting me to do something very corporate, or where it isn't really about my artistic style at all. And it's more about the technicality, like a lot of experience doing murals. And they're very prescriptive about what they want. And which, is fine if for some people, but sometimes I just don't feel like it's a good fit. But most of the time, the work I get is because they've seen something I've done specifically, and they want something similar for their space, but obviously adapt, like different. But there's something about that piece that they liked or that caught their attention.
Awesome. Perfect. It's super interesting.
Oh, me too. I'm like just like diving into and like the chat is quiet. So I'm assuming that everybody's just like listening and taking everything in. So okay, we're at our last question. It is the question that I think why everybody's here. Okay. Get your pen and pencil, everyone.
Pressure.
Yeah, Tom. What advice do you have for people trying to find their style or creative voice, but feel frustrated that it's taken too long? Chelsea, what we had discussed last time, I think it even like lit a light bulb for myself. Please share like your wonderful insight.
Sure. Well, if you can't nail down a style and it is feeling a little hodgepodgey, experimental, that's okay. But I would say give yourself the challenge of working within some restrictions. So let's say a color palette. Color will naturally set a mood and tone for your work and give a consistent feel to your body of work. And also pay attention to the fine details, because ultimately, like, the details are what set different styles apart. For example, if you're illustrating people, do your character designs have outlines or line work? What do their noses and eyes look like? Do they have texture on them, or is it more flat vector style art with geometric lines? What kind of brushes you're creating with? Especially if you're creating digitally, you can pick a few and work with those. Are you using consistent fonts if you're more on the design side of things, like for, let's just say, a curated feed? Does your subject matter have a common thread? Then ask yourself, which pieces do you feel proudest of, and what is it about them that makes you feel that way? What about other people's work do you gravitate towards? So yeah, I would just say, like, ask yourself these questions. And then it should be pretty revealing. You could even, like, if you want to be extra, make a mood board for yourself if you really like want to sort of explore that and drill deeper. Overall, though, I think, like, at the very start, if you're like, okay, I want a style, I think the more restrictive you are at first, the more likely you'll realize what you want to be doing and make allowances for those specific things. So just as an example, like the color palette that I've been working with for the last like little while, I had a different one, like, let's say like 6 months to a year ago. And yeah, I like switched it up. So because I just knew I wanted to make an allowance for that. Or let's just say there's a vibrant blue teal color that I've recently brought in because it really inspired me. So I've just started creating pieces with that. And then one last thing on that is that, or an idea that I had was, well, Ayla's mentioned it a few times, but doing like a social media challenge of some type. So the 36 days of type, or Inktober, or there's tons of like draw this in your style challenges on Instagram. If you search the hashtag, like, they're everywhere. So something like that. And then again, like, sharing your stuff, get the feedback, and consistently create, and then hopefully your style will emerge, or at the very least you'll start refining your Instagram. So that's that on that.
Oh, so amazing. Thank you so much for this. Ayla, from our rehearsal last time, you had the best quote for this question. Please share it with our audience.
Sure. So I'd say channel your inner Shia LaBeouf and just do it. It's really easy to get caught up in your own head and let the fear of not having the right style hold you back, like it did with me. I think a great place to start if you're struggling is to find some work or a style that you really like and try to recreate it. Deconstruct each piece and figure out exactly what parts you're gravitating towards. That way you can learn exactly how you can implement that or those components into your work in the future. And then after doing this with several different styles or pieces, you'll start to develop a style that you really enjoy. And I think finding the sweet spot of loving what you make and loving the process of making it really is key to finding your style.
Absolutely. And you had like a somewhat a similar answer, Stephanie. Like you said to don't overthink it and maybe find a theme.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important not to try to force a style on yourself. Like, I think it will just come naturally the more you do. Like, you just kind of have to start creating, like literally. And one exercise that I find really helpful is what we did in my art class in high school that I still do today when I'm feeling like just really stuck or unmotivated, which is just come up with a theme, you know, any kind of topic. It could be super broad, and then that's what they would do in class. You know, they give us the theme and then we start brainstorming. So literally just writing like a word mind map or whatever, and then select as I get deeper into this brainstorm, I start thinking more visually, and I start thinking of an idea of a subject or a theme, you know, I want to explore. And then look at images, look at some art examples, or just photographs of things that relate to it. So it's not necessarily art. And then by creating a sort of exercise for yourself, you're kind of forcing yourself to sort of show up and do work. And even if that doesn't become anything, I think the process of doing it will lead you to like think of things in your head. At least that happens to me. Like while doing something, I get excited by an unexpected effect, or you know, unexpected results might happen, or I think, you know what, this isn't for me, I'm not enjoying it, or I really enjoy this, I want to do more of this in my work. And sometimes that's just like I don't really do portraits, for example, but I was really in the mood to do it, so I spent like a week just like drawing faces, really like realistic style, but I never showed it really. And then I got bored really quickly. I'm like, I get more excited when I see patterns of tiles and like I realize it's just naturally part of. So it's like you have to follow your kind of what excites you, and you know, at the end of the day, it's like what excites you in ideas will drive your style, and in a medium, that's partially I think because of what you enjoy working with, which I don't remember which one of you touched on it, but you said that, and I agree with that too. Yeah, and I wanted to say something else, but I don't remember.
Well, we've been talking for an hour and a half, so it's a lot of you know, thinking and process, and you know, if you do remember it, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I remember it. Well, basically, sometimes just the materials excite me. Like when I go, you know, if you're feeling like you want some inspiration, go to the art shop and like look at the paint, or if you're into painting, I mean. And yeah, like literally, like I'll like buy something, and those colors I just bought will create a new body of work or influence the next few murals. Yeah, and it's still keeping with style because I'm just following my gut, you know.
That gut is important. Keep it happy, not just with kombucha, with your mind too.
That's the quote for the night.
Yes. Wow, this was incredible. I don't know for all of you in the audience, but I feel mega inspired. And this is not the end. This is you. Sorry, it was over to you, Ariane. It's not the end. It's not the end.
No, it's okay. Basically, it is time for the Q&A, and while you get ready for your questions, Chanel will be monitoring the Q&A, and if you want to ask your question out loud on camera, you can, or you can ask it in the chat and we'll just ask it for you. But while you guys think of your questions, I wanted to ask the panelists if you're working on something really exciting right now that you wanted to share, or any project that you wanted to share with everyone. I guess I forgot to pass the mic, but yeah, go ahead, Chelsea.
Okay, so yeah, I have my independent design business, HL Studio, at HL Studio on Instagram, or you can find my work at hls.com. Yeah, I'm currently booking summer projects, and I actually have a kids book that'll hopefully be getting published by end of summer, and a poetry book, both of which I'm working with authors on, but I'm doing the illustrations for it. That should be coming out early fall. And I also do have an Etsy shop, and come fall, I'm hoping to do, well, with COVID, like mostly behind us, that I can do some in-person markets and events like this one. So yeah, I hope to see some of you guys around.
Awesome. Stephanie, anything exciting in the works?
I just finished the mural today. Well, I'm going back for like touch-ups tomorrow, but I have a new one coming up for a school, so I'm pretty excited to do that, but it's on the exterior, but I haven't done a school before, so it's going to be fun. And I've been working on some clothing designs that I've been reluctant to share because I'm like a perfectionist, but I'm going to share it soon, just as a sort of passion project. So, yeah.
I'm really excited to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. This is like if you want to express yourself with color, I mean, go over to Steph's IG and check it out. I'm actually sharing your IG profile right now in the chat.
And Ayla, anything exciting in the works?
Like I mentioned before, I'm always trying to learn new things. So I'm in the middle of doing a couple courses of learning Cinema 4D and Redshift, which is a render engine. So going to be playing around with that. And I actually just finished my first piece using Redshift today, which I will be posting soon. I'm going to just do it and it'll be up there soon. So if you want to check it out, it'll be on my Instagram. It's a little skateboard. It's a little fun. Yeah.
This
Awesome.
is great. Fun stuff.
Yes, very. I look forward to seeing all of this.
Mm-hmm. Me too. So don't be shy. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say we can jump into the question and answer. I think the only question that came in was towards the beginning of the panel, and it was for Ayla, and it was from Jennifer. She was just wondering, do you remember the name of the course that you took on Skillshare to when you first learned how to do 3D and motion graphics?
So that one was for the wave animation I did. I don't remember the name specifically of the course, but it was by Visual Dawn. You can find him on Instagram too. He's got a lot of cool stuff, and I think he has a few courses up there, which are really cool, but that was one of them. So definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Let's see, there's some more coming in.
Oh, I just saw a question from Jody Marie.
Perfect. She's asking, as I'm developing my style, I'm experimenting, learning, gathering a lot of inspiration, but is starting to feel like I am oversaturated on ideas. I can start to feel overwhelmed. What do you do in the quiet and step back and regroup when you get stuck?
Sorry, there's two questions before that I missed that, but
we'll go back to those. Yeah, don't worry, we'll find them. But if anybody wants to jump in, go ahead.
Well, sorry, can I just jump in?
Of course.
Go for it.
Well, I was thinking, yeah, I totally can relate to that. And that's why that suggestion I had before of just picking one and focusing on it, I find to have been helpful for me, because then there's too many different conflicting ideas. And I think that when you start somewhere, it's like a tree, it branches out. So it starts to lead to something else. And then I think quite organically, it will become more defined. At least that's my perspective.
Yeah. Anybody else has some insight on this?
I would just say, going back to one of the things I had touched on is for me, I really restrained myself at first, or restrained. Yeah, gave myself some pretty strict rules to work within. And so let's just say you maybe pull together like 6 things that you really, really like. And then literally like I drop the colors out of it, figure out like the specifics of the details that you like about those things, and then just create a bunch of stuff with it. Like create like three pieces that you feel like would stylistically fit in with that mood board that you created. And then maybe like you'll learn something along that way. Yeah.
That is great.
I guess. I would say keep it simple and just make a list of all your ideas. That's typically what I do. Like if I'm starting a new passion project and I have like 1,000,001 new ideas I want to play with, just like making a list. And for me, it kind of makes them a little more real. And then I realize, oh, okay, maybe I don't want to play with that, or maybe I do really want to do this. And then kind of pick, depending on what your ideas are and how fulfilled they are, pick 1 or 2 maybe and run with that. And then you'll have a list for later on that you can reference back to when you don't have any ideas.
I do the same thing. It's so helpful because sometimes it's like dry as a desert up there, and it's nice to just be able to like refer to a list that like when you were feeling, you know, creative, that you can just jump on, you know, so yeah.
Awesome, thank you. We got also some couple the ones earlier, great questions too. Felix is saying was that he was reading a book on Andy Warhol, and from the book he pulled out that he changed his style, Andy Warhol changed his style drastically every couple of years, but the pop art seems to stick. Any thoughts on that? So I think it's Felix, you can correct me if you're, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I think that's really interesting. I'm not so, you know, knowledgeable on everything about Andy Warhol, but it made me think of another artist, Gerhard Richter. I don't know how to pronounce his name, I'll just type it. He's very famous and very old / maybe dead, I don't know. But anyways, his style is crazily changing throughout the decades. Like he did hyper realistic, it looks like a photograph, you know, portraits. And then his more recent work, you know, is very abstract and more about like squares of color. And I think it's totally fine to do that. I mean, you know, like the longer you practice design or art, you're gonna change. And I think there's nothing wrong with having sort of, you know, like a couple of years you're more into this, and you know, because that's development. I also think crap, I lost my train of thought. Man, what is wrong with me today? If anyone else wanted to
I have something actually quickly on Andy Warhol because I studied him a lot. If you don't mind me jumping in, I know for a fact that Andy Warhol actually stepped from like he used to be in marketing and then stepped into more kind of the artistic like field, and like he learned the art of serigraphy. So and then like the things that he was very intrigued in. Like he uses that as a subject, like the cans was like something like that was repeated, and like, you know, like he later on in his style he would use the same technique in also something, you know, some subjects that would kind of tie in. It's like he would for his style, like he would take a subject and then do everything that he could with that subject. And then when there was like nothing else to say, he would jump onto something else. For example, Marilyn Monroe, like and Jackie, like he was fascinated with how they were being portrayed in like the celebrity world. And then he came about and it got really dark. I guess like he was going through something, but like he like the famous tuna. There was a tuna art piece, and it was like this 2 women that died from poisonous tuna in a can, and that made them quote unquote famous because they were on the news everywhere. So like there's still that kind of element of celebrity, and then the technique that he was using to represent these women was the same. So he kept some elements and tried other like messages, I guess I could say. And I'm sorry I took over, Chelsea. Back to you.
That's okay. That's cool. We just got like a really good art lesson there. He's so cool, Andy Warhol, and his art. Like, I'm pretty sure there's a quote by him that's like, I just like to create what I like. So like he had like, yeah, so I don't know. He's just an interesting character. But yeah, I definitely think allowing yourself to evolve and your art to evolve makes total sense. I also think it depends like what you're trying to do. Like if you're a children's book author and you're trying to market yourself within a distinctive style, then it would probably be best if you at least marketed yourself within that very specific niche. But I do agree, like that, yeah, you can evolve and your art can evolve with you. It makes sense. Yeah.
Because you're not the same person as you grow. Your values will change and you'll get to know yourself better. You'll go through things that will probably make you see the world a different way. And that's the beauty of aging, whether we want it or not. Ayla, you're so young, I guess you don't have to worry about aging, right? Do you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, as I said before, I already kind of see my work as a work in progress and I'm expecting it to evolve. So obviously I'm an advocate for that. I think it's a healthy way to see your work, just knowing that like it's going to evolve with you. That's just how it usually happens.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that he came back to a specific style, and I think that's really awesome. Like you found something you liked and then you moved on from it, but decided to come back to that, or like always having that kind of central style to your work, which I think is going to happen with me. I like 2D and 3D mix, so hoping to follow suit with that, I guess.
I think evolution is kind of necessary. Sorry, Chanel. I think it's like, it'd be problematic if your art never changed throughout your whole career or lifetime. I think you should look forward to it, evolving and changing with you, for sure.
I think you should look forward to starting and then see where it takes you. That's the beauty of it. No matter what you're doing, just dive in, especially if you like it. Don't stop because it's hard on the first 5 tries. It's like spinning. You will hate it. The five first classes, you will hate it. Okay? The 6th one, kind of started to get it. When it's your 100th one, you're like, I got this. Exactly.
That's a good comparison. To anybody who spins, I'm sure they can relate. Another great question is that if you're in a job interview, would you pitch your style in the companies that you're into companies that are different than your own? So that is actually a really good question.
Well, if you want to work for that company, there's got to be something about them that you like. Well, assuming that then yes, I would, because you still want to show who you are, like in your portfolio. They're not probably expecting you to be producing that same style. It's what you bring to the table, right? Yeah. So they don't want everyone to be the same. They kind of want people to complement each other. I think that's what I think. Like also, like when I applied for architecture jobs, I showed a lot of my art, which had nothing to do with what I'd be producing there. But they like that. They like to see a little more of you or what makes you unique.
I totally agree. I think showing like how you can apply like your style or what you do best and create like a solution through that is always like a great way to represent yourself in a job interview for sure. And a portfolio, like you want it to sort of, what's the word? Like embody like everything that you can do a little bit. But so yeah, so definitely show stuff that is within your style, but I guess it also depends, like if you're looking for like a design job versus something else, but let's say it's design. Yeah. Like my first jobs, I was presenting a portfolio with a lot of work that I did in school that we were like, still learning. So it naturally was, my design style, I guess. And a lot of the time those pieces, like they went over pretty well because they were like, oh, like you have this like unique, colorful vibe happening. And yeah, I don't know how helpful that was, but I think it just depends like what you're trying to, where you're trying to apply.
I think like you kind of pitch your style naturally through your portfolio often.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
similar to what Ariane was saying, like as you work, well, mostly in design, like sometimes you build your style without even knowing it. So I think regardless of whether it's like a very distinct style or even just like small or smallly developed from doing client work, either way, you still have your style in your portfolio. And I think that's what makes you stand out to employers.
Exactly.
I was just on the, I keep talking over you, Shannon, but I was just on the others, like on an interview panel for hiring, and I did definitely notice people's styles through their portfolio, and I actually loved that kind of section at the end where people would present stuff that they just did for themselves or personal work. It just kind of, you could see through that work what they really enjoy doing, and even if they won't be doing exactly that in the work, there is always opportunity to maybe apply some of that, and knowing that when you're hiring someone is nice because then you can give them those opportunities to do that. If you don't know what someone hopes to do, then you can't give them opportunities to do it.
I think there's also the personality factor that goes into that, specifically if you're being interviewed or like, the personality. It also, I think, will tell the employer that I am able to create stuff, give myself my own brief, and self-motivate to create my own work on the side. And it shows some great skills that, other people might not have, and that may really differentiate you from the other people that are applying for the same job. Just do it, right? There, you have nothing to lose.
Very true. And then I think this will be the last question of the night before we kind of wrap up on things. But has anyone had to lose a style or shift your style at some point? Maybe because it was an obstacle between your work and the clients you want to attract. So I think touched this a little bit during the question, but I think it's a little bit more specific.
Well, my style is definitely, when it comes to illustration, like definitely seen a big shift from what I was doing before. And I will say, for sure, like I sort of ran at a certain point with like the more colorful style, like that just sort of, became my style. But I actually used to do work that was a lot more like edgy as well. And not to say that I like dropped it or like miss really doing that, but I definitely have sort of like culled from the like heap, if you will. I don't know if that's the right saying, but like I have sort of like picked what I felt was like working and what I was like enjoying to create. And then, I just ran with that for sure.
Can I just add quickly, when we had the rehearsal at Chelsea, and then you showed your the black and white work, and then you said that back then you were working for Cinnamon Toast. When you created that, I actually saw an influence from Cinnamon Toast into like the black and white drawing for some reason. Like I put the 2 and 2 together. Anyways, I just had to say that.
For sure.
I think that has happened to me in the past for sure. I did some murals that look very different than the kind of stuff I typically do now. because that was more like what the client specifically was looking for. For example, this shawarma restaurant, they wanted it in a kind of doodle style, and then they had like this long list of things they wanted included, like phrases and words, and yeah, which I mean, I'm happy with how it turned out. I like the work, but I definitely like, there was nothing in my portfolio that indicated I would do that style. So I definitely had to shift to do it. I don't know, it's tricky because sometimes I guess you could say you could have your sort of like passion projects and then your bread and butter project to some extent, especially when you're starting out. Like, so you have stuff, you know, just because it'll pay the bills, or it's a good opportunity for, making client connection, or just getting the experience. But then you have to, I guess, according to yourself, decide at what point is this going to help you move forward. If you don't feel like this is something you want to add to your portfolio, or it's not going to benefit you in any way, then that would be a time that you want to say no to a client.
I feel like that describes my life.
I
I have to shift like every day, I find. So like the stuff that I do between 9 to 5 is very different than the stuff I do on my own time. Not that like, I think it's kind of a great thing to kind of work on both at the same time. They make great portfolio pieces of stuff I do at work. Like I said before, I learn a lot from the techniques that I do. But yeah, it's kind of a balancing act of the work style and then like my personal evolutionary style, I guess.
Well, wasn't that amazing? Like, can we get like some virtual hands for our wonderful panelists? Again, feeling super inspired. Thank you so much for the audience. Like the questions were like so on point. All right. So remember about our contest from the very beginning? It is time to announce our winner, and now let Chanel do that for us.
Yay, I'm so happy I get to announce this. So I did a little random number generator, and the winner is, drumroll, virtual drumroll, Shiva.
Yay, Shiva!
Congratulations, Shiva. We'll message you for details.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Of course, I think you will have a lot of fun. If you do want to purchase the Mysteries in Color coloring book, it is being sold on Amazon. It's like, I think it's a great way to kind of disconnect and just kind of let your brain wander. If you're specifically seeking that serendipity moment in your creative journey. So we have a few housekeeping. We still have a few zines. If you have not gotten your copy yet, zine number 2 on pop culture. This was, how can I say this? How can I say this, Ariane? How much did we work on this?
I kind of blocked it from my brain, I think. I forgot all about that. No. I just think of the end product now and how great it is. But yes, it was a roller coaster ride, as some of you know, but we're really proud of how it came out in the end. And yeah, if you don't have one and it sparks your interest, we still have a few available.
Mm-hmm. And hint, hint, Ayla's work is in it. So you'll get to see some of the work. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the first one left, which both Stephanie and Chelsea were featured. Actually, let me show it to you while I have it up.
You'll be you're in a tiny square, but
I know, but still, we can all squint, right? There you go. So we have Ayla's work here.
With Andy.
And then, and Andy. Yeah, I'm so sorry, Andy. Andy is in the room. Hi, Andy. We have Chelsea here. Again, we can definitely recognize that style. And Stephanie, hold on, like a wonderful mural. There you go. I love that we're
Like
seeing
the sketch
Yeah.
and the mural, yeah.
I love that we're seeing both. So yeah, so we still have a few copies available. Go on to our website. You will get some goodies. The zine number 2 is about having a full sensorial experience. You get to listen to music, you get to eat bubble gum at the same time as you read it. And then you are even more inspired. So you attend the panel, you get a zine, then you're like double inspired.
There you go.
I will stop.
And we were just showing our panelists' work in the zine, but you can also be featured in the next one, as this is exclusive news. But the call for submission is live for zine number 3. The theme is very different from pop culture this time. The theme is raw, and you can get all the details on the website as of now. And
Yes.
deadline is April. I always get mixed up with my months. I'm still in the pop culture zine mode. No, deadline is August 13th for your applications.
Yes, so this one will be very interesting. So I think that was it.
That's it.
That's it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your precious time with us. It means the world to us. Stay connected on our social media to get to know our future events. Actually, while a lot of us are still here, go and share your handle for social media in the chat. And let's all connect with one another. Let's add this little magic of networking at the end of this event. So then you can carry out this conversation with your new peers, new friends, I should say. Once you're in the Ottawa Design Club family, you're in it for the long run. We love you.
Yes, well, that's it for us. We're seeing the handles come into the chat. Hi, Sean. I love seeing, we often see names come back every time. So we really appreciate all of you coming back to our events. And yeah, have a great rest of your evening. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time. And apply to the zine.
Yes.
Don't be shy. Do it.
We actually added a little quote inside the zine call for submission that says, trust your gut. So we talked about that tonight. Trust your gut. Everything that you do, put it out there, try. The worst answer that you'll get is a no. And if that's the case, you try again. And then maybe next time will be a yes. You never know. Simple as that.
That's it. Good night, everyone.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
I guess I should thank our wonderful panelists, but I did.
Yes, thank you to our panelists.
Thank you to our wonderful panelists.